everyone, it's Adrian Leah. I wanted to talk about caffeine in this video. I recently did a presentation on it. So I have my PowerPoint brought up on my phone. I have the writing that goes with the presentation. This is available on Medium. I'm finding another platform to post my writings on um, because it isn't as accessible as other platforms. So I'm going to read what I have in the PowerPoint, say more information that I have in the writing, and I'll have some comments for a couple of things too. So for caffeine, what is caffeine? It stimulates the central nervous system to increase alertness and energy levels. It provides ergogenic aid, heightening agility and performance, boosting reaction time, motor coordination, and concentration, lessens the perception of pain and exhaustion, and can improve memory and processing information if taken moderately. Um, so for ergogenic aid, for the performance, that would be athletic performance. It's still linked to the central nervous system, and you may be familiar with taking an energy drink for lessening the perception of pain. It's interesting because caffeine can be used to help with headaches, but it could also cause headaches, especially if you're going through a withdrawal. So there's products available over the counter and with a prescription. So in America, there's Excedrin, and that has multiple active ingredients. So that would be acetaminophen, pronounced in the American way, aspirin, and caffeine. For a prescription, you may be prescribed Fioricet, that brand name, and that has multiple active ingredients as well. So that's butalbital, acetaminophen, and caffeine. So I'm going to talk about the key players that are a part of this process when caffeine enters the body. So caffeine is in the methylxanthine class and a plant alkaloid. You could also say methylxanthine alkaloid. It has a similar molecular structure to adenosine, and this is one of the key aspects of this process. I'm going to talk about adenosine triphosphate, but there is a section where I talk about how they're separate entities. So adenosine triphosphate is ATP, and adenosine is a component of ATP. So ATP is a purine nucleotide. So I said tide, T-I-D-E, and there's the tide and side ending in S-I-D-E. There's a section on that too. It's composed of adenine base, ribose sugar, and phosphate groups. Phosphate groups is one of the main things that define a nucleotide, the characteristics of a nucleotide. So it binds to brain receptors, could be ATP receptors and P2 receptors. It's broken down into adenosine. So adenosine comes in later into the process, and ATP is the cell's energy currency or the body's fuel. Going into a related topic, because I'm still talking about alkaloids, and as I mentioned, caffeine is a plant alkaloid. So alkaloids are a large group consisting of plants and some fungi that contain nitrogen, and an example of an alkaloid is morphine. So morphine, there's the resin extracts from opium poppy seeds, the scientific name being Papaver somniferum, so that's the scientific name for opium poppy seeds. And extraction is an ideal method because making lab-made alkaloid is difficult. So morphine is an excellent and potent analgesic. And analgesic, it may be something to remember when you say pain in my, and that could help remembering an analgesic. So going back to another, um, going back to like the team player list, we have adenosine, and adenosine is essential for reaching deep sleep, also known as sleep pressure or process S. And as I mentioned before, it's a byproduct of ATP. So adenosine is a component of ATP and is a nucleoside, SIDE, and that's a molecule formed by nitrogenous base. And in this case, it would be adenine, and adenine being one of the things that the ATP is composed of. ATP is an energy-carrying molecule nucleotide, TIDE, that contains adenosine. So they are separate entities, and there are a couple of takeaways for the differences between a nucleotide and nucleoside. So the makeup for nucleotide um, is adenine ribose sugar of ATP, and then ATP, where the nucleus adenosine is adenosine, adenine, ribose sugar, and the three phosphates. So the nucleosides lack the phosphate group or groups. And so when you add a phosphate group to a nucleoside, it makes a nucleotide. And this is beneficial for high energy bonds for ATP being energy carriers that contribute to cellular function. Um, one of the main takeaways is the structural difference, as I mentioned with the phosphate groups. But there are a couple of things that you might also think about too. So breaking down ATP, because with that process, adenosine is included in that, or it is the byproduct that comes from ATP being broken down. So ATP can be broken down or metabolized during sleep, but adenosine can still accumulate. I wrote the, um, I just wrote a sentence saying I'm tired after being busy all day, and then ATP slash body fuel is the body's fuel is used because you're thinking during the day you have more energy, and if it's like a busy day especially, you're using up that energy, and then the adenosine starts to build up because adenosine causes fatigue, and then fatigue can happen if one doesn't get enough sleep too, because the metabolic process of breaking down ATP is incomplete. So you're using up your energy, and then as I was saying in the beginning, and then the neurotransmitter of adenosine, adenosine is a neurotransmitter, and it transmits the signal, I'm fatigued, I'm tired, and that's where it would be coming in play. So caffeine's mechanism of action. So caffeine is an adenosine receptor antagonist. When you think about the word antagonist, it would be working against. And The mechanism of action. So, mechanism of action is one of the things that gets mentioned pretty frequently with medication. Um, and it's how it's able to do what it's indicated to do, and then it's like how it got there. So it blocks the adenosine receptors that cause fatigue. And note that I say blocks, I could say jams, which is in the next slide too. Um, so it does have a similar molecular structure to adenosine, but it's not necessarily doing the same action that adenosine does. And again, adenosine saying that you're fatigued. And then I have another quote from what I wrote, like the writing. When levels of adenosine drop, the chemicals associated with alertness and wakefulness rise. So going into the next slide, and um, just to say, adenosine is broken down during sleep and is cleared from the system. So now going into the next slide, the piece that doesn't fit. So caffeine can bind to the receptors where adenosine belongs in complete lock and key battle. So it locks in, it blocks or jams the signal of becoming tired. So the neurotransmitter, again, adenosine, is sending the signal to the brain saying that I'm tired. And so the signal is no longer um, getting received from the brain. And instead of promoting sleep, it makes one more awake and alert because caffeine blocks the real adenosine and occupies the spot where it's meant to be. So this is almost like a parking spot where um, caffeine is, and um, adenosine doesn't have a place to go. And just because caffeine is residing in that area for that time being, it's an imposter that tells the brain it's not tired. It eventually imbibes itself and wears off. Um, so in the meantime, adenosine is still building up, and adenosine doesn't have a place to go because it needs to go. Well, it goes to that parking spot where caffeine is, and the buildup with a being saying fatigue, 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 it could cause drowsiness, and the action can be drastic for the body when caffeine imbibes itself and wears off. So that's when you might feel the sudden, immediate drop in energy or a crash, which is more of an American term. So there was a picture that I provided and I really liked it. It has adenosine, caffeine, and even norepinephrine too. So I just wanted to show how close in structure caffeine and adenosine is. So adenosine is the blue and caffeine is the yellow. And then the adenosine receptor is green. So that would be like the lock and key of where it's binding to. I do have some side effects in my PowerPoint, but I don't have all of them that I wrote in my writing. So I'll mention a couple. So psychological, jitters, anxiety, irritability, and they're in categories. Some of them are for maybe specific instances, such as withdrawal. Irritability, you may associate with withdrawal. Physical headaches, another one you could associate with withdrawal. Upset stomach with the acidity. Increased heart rate, high blood pressure, their sleep disruption interferes with normal sleep patterns, especially when taken later in the day. And then there's other where it can act as a diuretic, increase urination, and may cause dehydration. I did talk about overdose and death, but I didn't put it in my PowerPoint. So, in an overdose, a person can be confused, vomit, or hallucinate, and death can be caused by convulsions or erratic heartbeat. And then the next slide, or the last slide that I have, because this was, we're talking about the process of how caffeine um, can operate in the body. So some natural sources are coffee beans, tea leaves, cacao pods for chocolate, yerba mate, cola nuts for soft drink colas, and it can be added to some medicines as mentioned in the beginning, energy drinks as mentioned in the beginning, and sodas, synthetic or natural caffeine. So this is one that can be lab made. So that was the PowerPoint. I hope this was interesting because I did have a fun time writing about it. It's something that I have mentioned before, and I'm really happy that I did go into a deeper dive and did research that helped solidify some of the concepts that I was reading. Of course, there's always some things that's in science that transforms or like something that we learn and that comes into discovery. So there's always that, but I am really happy that I finally buckled down and really read more about it. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in another video.